April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Cologne, Germany. The sky is a sharp, pale blue dome, the kind only seen at the edge of winter's retreat. Below, the Rhine twists like a vein of mercury, dotted with smoke stacks and factory chimneys feeding the Reich's endless hunger for steel. High above them, a formation of bulky, silver-bellied aircraft drags contrails across the heavens, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, the newest, heaviest machines in the United States Army Air Forces. They are still strangers here. In the mess halls of the Luftwaffe, their name is a joke. The flying milk bottle, pilots sneer, too fat to climb, too slow to chase, too clumsy to fight. Against the sleek, shark-nosed Bf-109 Gustavs and Focke-Wulf 190s that prowl German skies, the P-47 seems almost prehistoric, a relic that somehow made it to war. The German aces laugh. The Americans know it, and on that cold morning, they climb anyway. The first to cross the frontier is Major Don Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group, his aircraft painted with a red-nosed cowl and streaks of exhaust trailing back like scars. The Pratt & Whitney are 2800 radial engine roars with a sound that shakes the canopy glass, a 2,000 horsepower drumbeat echoing across the stratosphere. Behind him, 8 Thunderbolts keep formation, their thick wings carrying 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns apiece. Together they form a wall of metal and noise. Below, in a Luftwaffe operations bunker near Bonn, the radar scopes bloom with the telltale arcs of inbound aircraft. Controllers bark bearings, the siren begins to wail. Pilots rush from the ready rooms, boots hammering down steel steps toward the flight line. Among them is Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, a 24-year-old ace credited with 17 victories. He knows the type they'll be facing, the Americans' new Thunderbolt. Big, sluggish, an easy kill. By 10:04 a.m., the first FW-190s are airborne, slicing through cloud toward the intruders. From the American side, the world becomes a chaos of vapor trails. Blakesley's flight banks right, sunlight flashing across their canopies. Radio static bursts with a single word, bandits. In seconds the altitude advantage vanishes, the fight descends in spirals and vapor, each pilot wrestling tons of aluminum through air that feels like molasses. The P-47, for all its mockery, reveals its secret mass. The Germans dive to attack and find themselves out-accelerated in the plunge. The Thunderbolt's sheer weight, over 7 tons loaded, gives it terrifying momentum. A single push of the stick and the aircraft drops like a stone, the altimeter spinning. The Luftwaffe pilots pursue, expecting to close in for the kill. Instead, the Americans level out low over the treetops, engines howling, and vanish into haze. Minutes later, anti-aircraft batteries near Koblenz report a thunderous roar overhead. The P-47 streak barely 100 feet above the Rhine, their wingtips grazing the fog. The Germans have lost them. In Berlin's briefing rooms, analysts scribble that the new American fighter is unsuited for dogfights, useful only as an escort, a lumbering protector of bombers. They don't yet realize what its airframe can endure, or how much lead it can carry. Back in England, maintenance crews at Debden airfield drag fuel hoses across the mud. Each Thunderbolt that lands leaves behind the smell of burnt oil and cordite. Ground men pry open cowlings blackened by exhaust, mechanics curse at the scorched cylinder heads. The pilots climb down soaked in sweat, faces streaked with grime, but alive. They don't speak of victory, there were no confirmed kills that morning. But neither were their losses. For a bomber escort mission in 1943, that is a miracle. The early Thunderbolts were crude, razorback fuselage, heavy control stick, no drop tanks. Yet the men who flew them discovered something intoxicating. They could dive through flak, shrug off hits that would shatter lighter planes, and still claw back altitude. The Luftwaffe laughed, but the laughter carried unease. Reports trickled in from ground units. These flying tanks survived hits that tore entire control surfaces away. A German captain watching a crash site near Eiffel remarked that the cockpit seemed built like a safe. Through May and June 1943 the Thunderbolts legend began to form, not from victory counts but from endurance. Pilots returned with tails shredded, wings punctured, engines leaking oil yet still running. One aircraft limped home missing 3 feet of wing. Another landed with the entire rudder gone, guided only by trim tabs and raw instinct. The R-2800 refused to die. In late summer, the 56th Fighter Group, the famed Wolf Pack, took delivery of their upgraded P-47 CS. At its head was Colonel Hubert Zemke, a Montana-born flyer with a calm stare and the instincts of a wolf indeed. Under his leadership the Wolf Pack refined tactics that would transform the flying milk bottle into a predator. They learned to fight vertically, to climb, dive, and hammer through inertia rather than twist in horizontal duels. They called it the boom and zoom. Each engagement became a thunderclap, a sudden dive from the sun, guns blazing for a heartbeat, then a pull into cloud before the enemy could react. The Luftwaffe's laughter began to fade. Autumn 1943 brought longer missions and colder skies. The Allied bomber streams pushed deeper into Germany, Regensburg, Schweinfurt, Emden, and the Thunderbolts went with them, limited by range but fierce in defense. On the ground, farmers watched their contrails drift like scars across the morning sky. On the radio, Berlin's propagandists still mocked the overweight American machine. But in field hospitals along the Channel coast, down German pilots whispered a different story: the Thunderbolt could not be shaken once it dived. In December, reconnaissance photos captured the aftermath of a low-level strafing run near Rouen. Burned trucks, shattered locomotives, twisted rails. Analysts identified bullet patterns matching the spacing of .50 caliber guns. No Spitfires operated that deep, the damage bore the mark of the P-47. The first hint of its new destiny had appeared. By winter's edge, the Thunderbolt was no longer just a bodyguard for bombers. It was becoming a storm unto itself, a machine that would soon descend from the clouds not to protect, but to destroy. And in the ready rooms of the Luftwaffe, the laughter had grown quieter. They still mocked it in public, but in private, they prayed they would not meet it low over the trees of France. December 22, 1943. Over the snowbound Ardennes. The air is brittle and thin, the color of frozen steel. The contrails of dozens of B-17 flying fortresses stretch like ribbons toward the east. They are heavy with bombs destined for railway yards at Osnabrück, and somewhere above them, tiny dots shimmer in the pale sun, their guardians, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolts of Zemke's Wolf Pack. Inside one of those cockpits, Captain Robert S. Johnson wipes frost from his goggles. The canopy rattles with vibration. His aircraft, Half-Pint, has been hit before. 7 times he's limped home with oil coating the windscreen, the radial engine coughing on fumes. Yet every time, the R-2800 pulled him back. Now, as vapor from his breath clouds the glass, he peers out toward the horizon where the German interceptors will come. And they do. 20 Focke-Wulf 190s climb from the haze like predators rising from the underworld. Their engines emit a distinct whine, liquid-cooled Daimler-Benz powerplants fine-tuned for climb and agility. Against them, the Thunderbolt is a brute. But the brute has learned how to fight. Johnson rolls inverted, drops the nose, and the P-47 falls like a hammer from the heavens. The speed builds instantly, 400, 450, 500 miles per hour, the wings trembling, rivets shrieking in protest. The Luftwaffe pilot who dives after him expects to see the Americans' wings rip free. Instead, the Thunderbolt simply pulls away, vanishing into the clouds below. When it re-emerges, it does so at treetop level. Johnson slams the throttle forward, levels out, and feels the aircraft surge. Behind him, the German silhouette looms, close, too close. Johnson yanks back the stick, climbs into a half-loop, and fires. 8 streams of tracer rounds arc upward in golden lines. The Focke-Wulf erupts in flame and falls toward the forest, scattering black fragments into the snow. The Thunderbolt is not elegant, but it is relentless. Across Europe, the same revelation repeats itself. Each engagement becomes a testament to its unnatural toughness. P-47s return to base with tails shredded, wings gashed by 20mm cannon fire, and engines so perforated that mechanics can push screwdrivers through the holes. Yet somehow, they keep flying. In early 1944, Zemke's pilots begin to talk of their mounts not as airplanes, but as beasts, animals that absorb pain and retaliate in fury. The Luftwaffe aces notice too. They complain that Thunderbolts seem to shrug off cannon shells, and when hit, they simply dive away faster than anything else in the sky. Meanwhile, at Republic Aviation's factory in Farmingdale, New York, engineers work around the clock, driven by the field reports. The new variant, the P-47D, gains a bubble canopy for visibility, reinforced wings for dive speed, and mounts for bombs and rockets beneath. It is no longer just a fighter, it is evolving into a fighter-bomber, a weapon designed not only to duel with the Luftwaffe but to destroy its world beneath. By March 1944, Allied planners look ahead to D-Day. The invasion of France will need not only bombers and paratroopers but a hammer to smash German logistics, rail lines, convoys, troop concentrations. The P-47 fits perfectly. It can fly low, soak up flak, and deliver devastation. And so, the Wolfpack trains differently. No longer do they climb to 30,000 feet. They descend into valleys, streak along roads, and strafe mock columns of trucks painted with swastikas. The roar of their engines becomes the soundtrack of a new kind of warfare. Over England's countryside, farmers watch silver shapes flash across their fields, drop practice bombs, and vanish behind the hedgerows. The sound echoes like thunder. Children run from their barns to wave. Some call them the Jugs, a nickname born from their bulbous shape, short for juggernaut. The pilots adopt it proudly. March 27, 1944. Amiens, France. A railway yard thick with freight cars and locomotives sleeps under morning fog. At 9:10, the first bombs fall. In seconds the fog ignites, a wall of orange fire and black smoke reaching skyward. As the French resistance watches from the hedgerows, they see something they've never witnessed before: low-flying aircraft, diving nearly vertically, pulling out at impossible angles, spitting streams of fire. The Thunderbolts have arrived. For the German soldiers on the ground, the effect is biblical. Convoys scatter in panic. The .50 caliber guns rake the roads, tearing through armor and flesh alike. Trucks burst into flame, locomotives explode in showers of steam. The Luftwaffe's mockery of the flying milk bottle is replaced by a single word whispered among ground troops: Donnerflugzeug, the thunder plane. Each mission feeds the myth. In April, Zemke's Wolfpack alone destroys over 1,000 vehicles and dozens of locomotives. In May, they add hundreds more. Pilots joke grimly that their enemy now fears the sound more than the sight, that the scream of the R-2800 engine sends men diving for ditches before the guns even fire. Yet for all its strength, the Thunderbolt exacts a price. It is not nimble, not forgiving. Pilots who misjudge their dives find the aircraft too heavy to pull up in time. More than a few P-47s bury themselves in French soil after low-level attacks gone wrong. Training fields in East Anglia become littered with wrecks, reminders that power alone is not mastery. Still, the tide is turning. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe is bleeding. Fuel shortages ground many of its best squadrons, replacement pilots are barely trained. Against them come hundreds of Thunderbolts, now joined by the longer-range P-51 Mustangs. Yet the Jug retains a unique place: it is the brute that leads the charge, the sound of the Allied spear. June 6, 1944. Normandy. Before dawn, the invasion begins. Allied paratroopers drop behind the beaches, and from the first light of day, the P-47s take to the air. Their orders are simple: clear the roads, choke the reinforcements, destroy everything that moves with a cross on it. From above the French hedgerows, the sky becomes a canvas of fire. The jugs dive in endless succession, bomb racks emptying, guns flashing. German columns, tanks, half-tracks, trucks, burn from bayou to Cannes. The roar is constant, the earth shaking with each pass. The Luftwaffe tries to respond, but their numbers are too few. Pilots who once mocked the Thunderbolt now see it screaming down upon them, guns blazing, wings glittering with sunlight and death. By sunset, the beaches are secure. The P-47 has proven itself not just as a fighter, but as the blunt instrument of liberation. In field reports written that night, German commanders record the same phrase over and over: Tiefflieger terror, low-flying terror. The laughter that began in 1943 is gone completely now. In its place is silence, the kind born of realization, the sound that comes when myth turns to truth. And the truth is this: the Thunderbolt is not a joke. It is judgment. July 25, 1944. Saint-Lô, France. The horizon burns, columns of smoke rise so high they merge with the clouds, forming a false overcast of soot and flame. Beneath that dark ceiling, the Allied armies grind forward, their tanks clawing through hedgerows and shattered orchards. Ahead of them, the German lines bend but do not yet break. Then, from the west, the sound begins, a low, distant rumble, growing steadily until the ground itself seems to vibrate. French villagers pause in their cellars and look upward. The roar becomes a scream. 400 P-47 Thunderbolts sweep across the battlefield in waves. Each one dives at impossible speed, releasing 500-pound bombs and 5-inch rockets into the maze of German defenses. In minutes, Saint-Lô ceases to exist. The bombardment, Operation Cobra, marks the first time in history that tactical airpower completely annihilates an army's front line. Down in the fields, Sergeant Dieter Kruger of the 275th Infantry Division stumbles through a cratered ditch, clutching his helmet as the sky collapses. The explosions don't come one by one, but all at once, a rolling wall of sound. Trucks detonate. Horses scatter. A column of panzers vanishes in a chain of fireballs. He had heard of the jugs, but never believed the stories. Now, as the air fills with shrapnel and black smoke, belief is no longer a choice. The Thunderbolts own the sky. In the aftermath of Cobra, the Allied advance becomes a pursuit. The Wehrmacht retreats across France in long, desperate convoys. Every road, bridge, and crossroad becomes a death trap. From dawn to dusk, the Thunderbolts hunt. They come in pairs and fours, their silver wings flashing in the sun, their shadows racing over fields before the scream of engines arrives. Each pilot picks targets like a surgeon: locomotives, trucks, half-tracks. The .50 caliber guns open up, their tracers stitching through the landscape. Oil trucks erupt into geysers of flame. The air smells of fuel and dust. A single squadron can destroy an entire battalion in a day. By August, the Germans have a new phrase whispered among their soldiers: Jabo-Angst, fighter-bomber fear. Convoy drivers refuse to move in daylight. Infantrymen march only at night, hiding under trees by day. The sound of a radial engine sends men diving for cover, whether it belongs to friend or foe. From above, the roads of France are littered with wreckage: burned-out tanks, overturned wagons, twisted guns, and bodies. For every destroyed vehicle, a pilot's kill mark is added to a Thunderbolt's fuselage. Colonel Hubert Zemke, still commanding the 56th Fighter Group, walks the line at Boxted Airfield one evening and studies the artwork painted on the aircraft noses: snarling wolves, shark teeth, cartoon bombs. Each represents hundreds of missions. Each tells a story of destruction carried out with machine precision. And yet, beneath the bravado, Zemke sees the toll. The pilots are young, many not yet 20. They fly 6 missions a day, dive through flak so dense it looks like black rain, and come back shaken. Some sit in silence after landing, staring at their hands as if trying to wash away the tremor. The Thunderbolt is no longer a novelty, it is a tool of attrition. August 1944. Falaise Pocket. Nearly 100,000 German troops are trapped in a shrinking corridor between Falaise, Trun, and Chambois. Allied armor closes from the north and south. Overhead, the sky belongs to the P-47s. From 8 a.m. until dusk, the jugs hammer the pocket without mercy. Every road becomes a column of smoke. Every forest edge hides burning vehicles. Pilots describe the battlefield as a slaughter pen. The Luftwaffe tries to provide cover, but their numbers have dwindled to almost nothing. The few Mi-109s that rise are instantly overwhelmed. Major David Schilling of Zemke's Wolfpack leads one of the most infamous attacks of the war, 30 Thunderbolts descending simultaneously on a German column near Ardennes. The lead aircraft drops two 500-pound bombs squarely into the road. The blast turns trucks into kindling. Schilling's wingman strafes the survivors. For 5 miles, the road becomes a river of fire. Later, reconnaissance photos show what remains: over 2,000 vehicles destroyed, fields blackened, horses charred in their harnesses. The French call it La Route de la Mort, the Road of Death. As the Allies push toward Paris, the Luftwaffe's laughter from the year before seems like a dream. Now, even its veteran aces know the sky is lost. In a battered hangar near Metz, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, the same pilot who once scoffed at the Thunderbolt's bulk, watches through binoculars as P-47 strafe a retreating panzer column. The guns flicker like lightning. He can see the tracers ricochet off armor, penetrate, and set engines ablaze. He lowers the binoculars and mutters that the Americans have found the perfect weapon, not for dogfighting, but for erasure. That night, Stigler writes in his logbook, "The Thunderbolts own the roads. Our armies are hunted from the sky." September 1944. Belgium. The landscape has changed from hedgerows to open plains. The Allied columns push east toward the Rhine, but every bridge they cross is shadowed by Thunderbolts overhead. At Florennes, pilots of the 365th Fighter Group, the Hell Hawks, begin operating from captured airfields only minutes from the front. Their missions are brutal and personal. They see the faces of the men they kill. Sometimes they see horses and civilians among the wreckage. War has become intimate. They fly so low they can smell the smoke from their own targets. Hellhawk pilot John F. Westcott writes in his diary, "You don't fight the enemy now. You hunt him. He moves, he dies. Simple as that." It is a cruel arithmetic, but an effective one. German resistance collapses not from lack of courage, but from paralysis. Every movement risks death. Every supply truck, every radio car, every armored column that tries to regroup is annihilated before it reaches the front. The Allies advance faster than their maps can be updated. By October, the P-47s have become legends among the ground troops they protect. Infantrymen cheer when they hear that thunderous radio growl overhead. Tank crews mark their vehicles with white stars so the jugs won't mistake them for Germans. In contrast, the Wehrmacht dreads the same sound. Prisoners of war later tell interrogators that morale collapsed not from artillery or tanks, but from the sense that the sky itself was against them. The Luftwaffe, once feared as an unstoppable machine, now hides in its own homeland. November 1944. Aachen. Rain pours over the first German city to fall to the Allies. The Thunderbolts circle overhead like vultures. Below them, American infantry advances street by street, while German artillery shells crash among the ruins. When a stubborn pillbox holds up the advance, a flight of P-47s is called in. They dive through the storm, rockets streaking into the target. The concrete emplacement disappears in a plume of dust. The soldiers on the ground cheer, they've seen this before, and they know what it means. Wherever the jugs go, resistance dies. The P-47 has become not just a weapon, but a symbol of inevitability, of crushing momentum. The Luftwaffe can still sting, but it can no longer stop the tide. By year's end, the Americans have destroyed over 6,000 enemy aircraft, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 vehicles, and countless supply depots. Each one leaves behind a scar across the continent, a burned memory etched into the soil. And as the winter of 1944 closes in, the Thunderbolts prepare for their greatest trial, one that will push both machine and man to their breaking point. December 16, 1944. Dawn over the Ardennes. A blanket of fog clings to the forests, so thick that visibility drops to mere yards. Snow lies fresh on the pines, muffling all sound. From above, the landscape seems frozen in peace. Yet under that calm surface, 200,000 German troops wait in silence. At 5:30, the stillness shatters. The ground shakes as artillery opens fire. Dozens of panzer divisions surge westward, Hitler's last gamble, the Ardennes counteroffensive. The Battle of the Bulge has begun. For the first time in months, the skies belong to the Germans. The fog that covers their advance grounds Allied air power. The Thunderbolts sit useless on icy runways in Belgium and northern France, their wings coated with frost, their pilots pacing and swearing inside freezing tents. Without the eyes and claws of the P-47s, the front collapses. German armor, King Tigers, Panthers, and half-tracks, pour through the forest roads. American convoys are ambushed, towns swallowed. In Bastogne, the 101st Airborne becomes encircled. The weather seems to have turned traitor. For 7 days, the fog refuses to lift. Inside a makeshift command post near Florennes, Colonel David Schilling slams his fist against a map. Every hour the weather holds, hundreds of American soldiers die on the ground. The pilots can hear the artillery from their airfield, but they can do nothing. Engines idle pointlessly, steam rising from exhaust stacks into the fog that won't burn off. Then, on the morning of December 23, the miracle comes. The sun pierces the mist like a blade. Slowly, the fog dissolves. A clear blue sky emerges over the frozen woods. At once, engines roar to life. Mechanics sprint between rows of Thunderbolts, ripping away frost covers and fueling lines. Pilots climb into cockpits stiff with cold, hands numb even through gloves. The airfields erupt with sound, 1,000 radial engines turning the snow to vapor. The storm is unleashed. From dawn until dusk, the Thunderbolts return to the skies in waves. The German spearhead, once cloaked by weather, now lies exposed. Near Houffalize, a column of armor snakes along the forest road. The first P-47s dive from the sun. Bomb racks open, the lead plane releases 2 500-pounders. The road erupts. Tanks roll into ditches, treads snapping. Before the dust settles, the next flight arrives, strafing survivors. Within hours, the road network becomes a graveyard of metal. Reports from the ground describe the sky as filled with iron. Pilots fly so low that the snow from treetops blasts upward in their wake. Rockets scream across frozen fields, detonating among trucks packed with fuel. The resulting inferno lights the woods like day. In Bastogne, soldiers trapped under siege look up to see the Thunderbolts tearing through the haze, dropping supplies in one pass and unleashing death in the next. Each roar of engines lifts morale. The men shout and wave as if greeting saviors. For them, the jugs are salvation itself. The winter campaign tests man and machine alike. Engines seize in sub-zero temperatures. Frostbite creeps through gloves. Guns jam mid-run, forcing pilots to improvise, turning their aircraft into battering rams of sound and intimidation. Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Group describes it later as flying through needles. Ice crystals slice visibility, the cold gnaws at every joint. Yet the pilots keep going, mission after mission, diving through flak so thick it feels alive. On Christmas Day, over St. Vith, 30 Thunderbolts sweep in from 12,000 feet, finding German armor massed near the town. The first attack sets off secondary explosions that ripple for miles. Tanks cook off one by one. The survivors scatter, but the sky itself hunts them down. Civilians watch from basements as the ground trembles. To them, it seems as if a storm has taken human form, thunder that comes not from clouds, but from wings. By December's end, the German advance is broken. What began as a daring offensive now dissolves into retreat. And every mile of that retreat is marked by wreckage. Roads once crowded with panzers are now lined with burned-out hulks. The air smells of oil and cordite. Smoke rises straight into a windless sky. The Luftwaffe, desperate, commits its last reserves, a final air offensive on January 1, 1945, codenamed Operation Bodenplatte. Hundreds of German fighters strike Allied airfields at dawn, hoping to cripple their aircraft on the ground. They achieve surprise, for a moment. Then the Thunderbolts rise. Within hours, the sky over Belgium becomes a killing field. Experienced German aces, many flying their last missions, are cut down by the same P-47s they once mocked. By nightfall, over 300 German planes lie wrecked in snow-covered fields. The Luftwaffe will never recover. In the quiet after battle, Thunderbolt pilots walk among their own rows of frozen aircraft. Some are riddled with bullet holes, others rest on flat tires, patched hastily between sorties. The men light cigarettes with trembling hands, too exhausted to speak. They have seen things few can describe, the disintegration of armies, the endless burning convoys, the way war consumes everything and gives nothing back. But they know one thing, the Thunderbolt held the line. Without it, Bastogne would have fallen. Without it, the Bulge might have reached the Meuse. The same machine once ridiculed as too heavy, too slow, too crude has become the reason the Western Front still exists. January 1945. Snow begins to melt across the Ardennes. The wrecks of tanks glisten with frost under the pale sun. Along the roads, columns of German prisoners march west, their boots crunching on ice. Above them, P-47s patrol in lazy circles, not in war now, but in dominance. In field headquarters, Allied commanders send a single message back to Republic Aviation. The jug broke the Bulge. And back at the factory in New York, the workers, men and women who built the machines by the thousands, pause for a moment, unaware of the full meaning of their labor. They only know that their product has changed history. The Thunderbolt has transcended mockery, doubt, and even death. It is no longer just an aircraft. It has become a force of nature, the embodiment of the Allied will. February 14, 1945. Near the Rhine. The morning fog is thin and yellow, tinted by the smoke of burning fuel depots. The ground below has ceased to resemble a country, it's a graveyard of machinery. Trucks, half-tracks, tanks, all lie overturned along roads that used to pulse with movement. From 15,000 feet, they look like toys abandoned by a careless child. The Thunderbolts return again and again. Each sortie begins the same way, engines thundering to life in gray dawn, condensation curling from exhausts, crews waving them off into the east. Once airborne, they climb through haze and turn toward Germany, following the scar of the Rhine. The pilots no longer need coordinates. The whole landscape is a target. By now, the Luftwaffe scarcely exists. Fuel is gone, pilots are dead or captured, and the great airfields of the Reich stand empty, pocked by craters and littered with wrecked aircraft. When German fighters do rise, they come in ones and twos, desperate and doomed. In one of those final encounters, a lone FW-190 makes a suicidal head-on attack against a flight of Thunderbolts escorting bombers near Bonn. The American leader holds formation. When they pass, the Germans' fire shatters the canopy, but the P-47 keeps flying. The enemy plane disintegrates in mid-air. The American, half-blinded by oil, limps back across the lines and lands on a single wheel. That night, the crew chief counts 263 bullet holes in the fuselage. The engine still runs. Across western Germany, rail yards, bridges, and airfields vanish under the continuous hammering of the jugs. Their thunder is constant, day after day, a mechanical heartbeat over a dying Reich. In Cologne, trains never reach their destinations. Locomotives sit frozen in place, boilers burst, smoke curling through glassless station roofs. In Kassel, a convoy of supply trucks catches fire, lighting the riverbanks red. In Dortmund, warehouses explode in sequence, each burst reflected on the clouds above like distant lightning. The Germans on the ground no longer laugh at the P-47. They call it Der Tod von oben, death from above. Civilians hide in cellars, covering their children's ears as the engines pass. Soldiers abandon vehicles and flee into woods that no longer protect them. The forests themselves are on fire. At the same time, in the east, the Red Army pushes toward Berlin. The Western Allies close from the west. Between them, the Thunderbolts sweep the last arteries of the Reich. March 2, 1945. The Rhine crossings. As Allied engineers build pontoon bridges under artillery fire, waves of P-47s fly top cover, strafing every German attempt to counterattack. A panzer division trying to cross near Remagen is caught in the open. Within 15 minutes, it ceases to exist, turned to twisted, smoking metal. American infantry who witness it describe the scene as thunder made visible. The next day, the first Allied troops step onto German soil under skies guarded by Thunderbolts. The psychological impact is immense. For soldiers who remember 1943, when the Luftwaffe ruled the air, it feels like walking under a new law of nature. April 1945. The war nears its end. Yet the missions continue, more relentless than ever. The jugs strike retreating columns heading for Bavaria, cut off bridges on the Elbe, and obliterate airfields where German jets, the new Me-262s, attempt to rise. The jet fighters are fast, but they must take off from long, straight runways. The Thunderbolts destroy those runways. In one remarkable sortie, a squadron of P-47s locates a hidden ammunition train near the Harz Mountains. The lead pilot drops his bombs short to block escape, then the others strafe. The resulting chain reaction lasts for hours. Witnesses on the ground describe the explosion as a mountain-breathing fire. Even victory carries a weight. Many of the pilots who began in 1943 are gone. Some were shot down by flak, others lost to weather, others simply vanished into smoke and sky. Their names are painted in small letters on mess hall walls. Those who remain are older than their years, faces burned by wind and oil. They fly out of habit now, not for glory, but to finish what began 2 long years ago when the world laughed at their machine. Colonel Hubert Zemke, the Wolfpack's commander, writes in his diary, "The jug has outlived its mockers. It outclimbed fear, outdove doubt, and outfought time itself." April 12, 1945. Near Magdeburg. A flight of Thunderbolts patrols above the Elbe when the radio crackles with news: President Franklin D. Roosevelt is dead. For a moment, no one speaks. The engines drone on, steady, indifferent. The war will end soon, but the men realize it may never truly leave them. They turn for home in silence. 2 weeks later, Hitler is gone, Berlin in ruins. German resistance collapses everywhere. Pilots returning from their last missions see white flags flying from church steeples and barns. The roads once lined with wreckage are now lined with prisoners. On May 8, the war in Europe ends. At Boxted Airfield, the Wolfpack gathers for the final debrief. The men stand beside their scarred aircraft, their uniforms streaked with oil and dust. Mechanics lean against propellers, exhausted. No one cheers. There is only the wind and the faint ticking of cooling engines. Across the continent, the silence feels unnatural. For 2 years, Europe had lived beneath thunder. Now, for the first time, the sky is still. In the months that follow, the P-47s begin to disappear. The newer, sleeker Mustangs take over the airfields. Some Thunderbolts are scrapped, others sent to training schools or foreign allies. Yet the legend remains. Among infantry veterans, the name Jug becomes sacred. They swear that the sight of its silver wings once saved their lives. French farmers still find shell casings in their fields and keep them as talismans. And in museums decades later, visitors who stand beside the hulking fuselage are struck by its sheer presence, larger than any other single-engine fighter of the war, unapologetically massive. Its skin bears rivets like scars, its wings broad enough to carry vengeance itself. Those who know its story understand what it means, that strength is not always grace, and that sometimes the machine that looks too heavy to fly becomes the one that never falls.